Well, welcome to roundtable number 3. I'm joined by John Handy, environment artist on the left.
Hello.
And Craig Scott, our returning producer on the right. Cool. Although this is the other way around for you guys, so whatever. All right, so let's jump in. First question from the community is, how dark will nighttime be? And should players expect realistic darkness or cinematic darkness?
So I like the realistic darkness,
right.
But I don't think it's great for video games. There was a mod for, I think, Fallout that gave you realistic darkness. So I'm going to put this on. I was like, I don't like it. I can't see anything. Real darkness is not fun to play. Cinematic darkness is often a bit too light. I think we're going to find a nice happy medium between. So let's call it video game.
I think the key with it really is to have a contrast between day and night in terms of gameplay. So as long as there's that contrast, then it's fun. Then
I had this really fun time when I was in Armour. Actually, I was running around in the night, and one friend had got night vision goggles. All the rest of us absolutely clear, couldn't see a thing. So he's in front of our little column, and he's got like a glow stick, and we're all following the glow stick. You can't see a damn thing, of course, right? And then as soon as you hear gunshot, glow stick goes over there, and we just go. Oh, okay. Didn't end very well.
With that in mind, we want, as John says, we want to have that contrast. Like the nighttime gameplay has to be interesting and fun, and it has to have a use for all the different tools that we're going to put in. So you don't want to be super dark, so you can't play, but it has to be dark enough for everything to make sense and have interesting gameplay around it.
I think that kind of counters this question as well, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So how are we going to handle players who might adjust their gamma settings or other kind of visual settings to gain an unfair advantage when it's dark?
That's a tricky one.
That is a tricky one.
I mean, if you can kind of see anyway, then it's probably going to be less of a thing. In PUBG, it was definitely a thing to go. Sorry, not PUBG. In Armour, it was definitely a thing to crank your gamma because you might see the odd outline, and that could be the difference between being very dead and very not dead.
I don't think it's going to be dark enough to have that huge an effect.
Yeah.
And there might be ways that we can get tech.
Yeah.
To get involved on that.
If all else fails, ask the tech guys to come up with a cunning solution.
I'm sure we can figure something out.
Okay. So with Mavericks using your homeland of Scotland as an environmental inspiration, does that also extend to giving the map a permanently high latitude, which would provide relatively low angle sunlight much of the time, and in turn potentially influence in-game tactics if things like sunstrike, which is like, if you're driving a car and it wipes out your windscreen, occurs?
In terms of can we do it? Yes. CryEngine gives us the ability to do it. I would say that comes down to design, really. I think it'd be interesting. I think it's interesting to have, especially with the time of day cycle, to have, times of day where you might have an advantage in one area and not in another, potentially. But I don't know what you think about that.
So I've been lucky. I've lived in very far northern latitudes before. I lived in Iceland. I lived in Iceland for years. I know what that sun setting and raising at ridiculous angles can do to your walk home and being blinded. And it's interesting, and you get some dramatic lighting, I was about to say in the world, but in the real world, the long shadows and beautiful. Shadows. And I think we capture that kind of element if we can, but the actual gameplay around, those high angle sun, I think we'll look at taking elements of it, but mostly it will be more what people expect from the sun. Those extremes look cool, but if you don't know about that and you've never lived at those latitudes and you're used to just sun goes up, sun goes down, instead of just sun goes up, it's just sun going down. We'll make it as game realistic as possible. And it's not something, I'm not saying we won't look at it, because it's definitely a neat idea, and see if we can get some of the benefits that come with it. But as a whole, I would say we'd stick with very, standard lighting and daylight.
I mean, it's always something we can look at in playtesting. We can fiddle around with, right? Because the controls for it are
it's really simple.
There, right?
CryEngine gives us a lot of control over this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's something we can play around with. And to be honest, it's honestly not something I'd really given much consideration.
No, I hadn't thought about it really either. I mean, I don't know how North Scotland is, so I don't know how realistic that would be.
But it can get pretty blinding.
We're kind of on sort of a Scandinavian-esque line, aren't we?
Yeah.
So it's further north than that. So we're talking top of Scandinavia, kind of parts of Russia, sort of line there, right? Really. Yeah. I don't know, interesting one. That's why I had to
It's
include
very,
that.
it's very
Really
cool,
Yeah.
and I think, like I say, from my experience, you get beautiful sunsets and beautiful sunrises.
Yeah.
If we can capture some of that and make things
I was going to say that's
really
what's in my
pretty,
head from an artist's perspective.
that's great. The gameplay aspects of it, that's more fiddly to play with, but it's definitely got some interesting ramifications.
I mean, if you play around it, it's interesting, right? So if you have the sun to your back and you're looking down your scope and so on, you have a really strong inherent advantage when you look that way, because like anyone looking at you is gonna, unless you're high enough to be silhouetted, right? But it's going to be difficult for you to be picked out if you're kind of just lost in that.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, but
tacky-
at the same time, there would be a risk to that as well. Like the chance of you actually being at the right point on a mountain with the sun behind you at the time you need to shoot someone, and being within the gameplay area. There's a lot of variables there that you would have to nail. So I think it's something we should look at. Maybe
It could also be something where maybe we skip it for the battle royale, but maybe it ends up being a thing in the MMO
A larger
later on.
factor in there,
So speaking of other things that may or may not end up in the battle royale, when it rains, will small streams and large rivers increase their water volume? And if so, can players potentially be swept away while trying to cross a flooded river?
that's a cool question.
Really cool. I've collated the coolest questions.
I'm gonna say no for the battle royale right now. I haven't heard any mention of that. It's a really cool feature.
We have talked about it a little bit with raising water lines and stuff, and those growing, but they've been more linked to larger acts of destruction in the map. So things we've talked about, I'm making no promises at this point, but the things we've talked about is we might have a hydro dam.
Yeah.
And in a game session, that hydro dam can somehow, through complex means, get blown up.
I'm having flashbacks to Battlefield 4.
I know Stu, our lead artist, is a big fan of levels that flood. And those kind of things, so you can dramatically change the layout of the map, is definitely something that we want to play around with.
Yeah.
As to the rain, I think our rain cycles they'll not be long enough. Like our game sessions are pretty short.
Yeah.
For any rain to realistically raise water levels takes a huge amount. We live in Cambridge, and you only see the canals raise a little bit after the heaviest of rains. I know we shouldn't take realism too much into account because we are making a game, but I don't think it has a large enough impact in the world.
Yeah.
But more of these larger scale things could really change about how a map flow works. If I destroy this dam or I blow up this bridge, how does that affect the flow of players through the map?
Yeah.
And that's more interesting to me. I think this is a neat idea, but I'm not sure how much we'd get out of it. With CryEngine, when it rains, we do get puddles, and that will affect things like our tracking system.
It fills in the footprints and stuff like that as well. Right?
that kind of thing.
Away a little bit.
The other thing we talked about is how I've been running in mud and I run onto concrete and it's raining. Are those footprints then washed away? Do I want to then use that as a way to cover my tracks? Or if I'm bleeding, like if it starts raining, do the blood trails get washed away? So we are definitely looking at rain and playing around with it. As to raising and lowering water levels, it's something we can consider, but I don't think for the Battle Royale it's something we'll be overly looking at just now.
I remember there was this one Battlefield map where you start off and there's all these amphibious vehicles, and you're like, oh, this is a beautiful sunny day. Why is this the amphibious vehicles? And then my friend goes, oh, let me show you. I'll blow up the dam now. And I'm like, no, I really prefer you did.
Pirate.
French
He's
pirate
Finnish,
by the
so
sound.
I don't know. He blows up the dam, and then suddenly I'm like, I see this big wave of water coming towards me. And I think, well, you can swim, but those guys on the building are probably going to shoot me really shortly. So yeah, not the greatest experiences with flooding maps. Perhaps.
I don't think it would be quite as dramatic as that. It might just fill up a gorge.
Yeah.
Meaning that you have to now swim across it. It might make it easier. But we're playing around with ideas like that.
You could have like loot in the gorge, but then when you go in, that could be a trap.
Like a mouse trap.
Yeah, you go in like,
the cheese.
oh, golden loot
But,
box,
like,
and you
take the cheese.
smush, right? Yeah, and get a bit wet.
And those are definitely things we want. We've talked a lot about how we want this world simulation in a dynamic environment. So this is just the logical progression of that.
Okay, cool. So for the drone aspect, how far along would you say you are for the map? That's a really weirdly phrased question. For the drone aspect, how far along would you say you are, including procedural stuff, artist influence, buildings, etc. How far along would you say we are with the the map, with the areas you've kind of got to, and and the stuff you're kind of getting to.
So yeah, I think we're well underway. We've got a lot of the key areas in terms of development. It's the way I'm liking to work at the minute is concentrate on the core thematics first, and then all the stuff in the middle isn't really too hard to art up after that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah, it's a matter of like creating these assets, nailing down exactly what we need, and like getting those into a cool area so we know exactly what we have to play with, and then. I was about to say it just comes down to world building, but it's like the world building aspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, it's a lot easier to just go in and start arting stuff up when you have all the assets. Like,
it's almost like a game in itself.
Yeah, you're building, and you're thinking about the story about areas as well as you build them, and you add the assets. Like, oh, what happened here? But to do that, you have to build the assets, and that's the time-consuming bit. So we're building a lot of assets, putting them into this smaller area to make sure we've got everything we need, and then that will gradually build out, and we'll just keep working on building the map.
I mean, there's that intermediary stage as well where you do the whole laning for the. When you have like a point of interest, you do the laning, like how are people going to get in here and how that's like a gameplay.
Right.
So
combining the gameplay,
the
design and gameplay design with the actual art side.
So it wouldn't be much point like fully arting that up before we kind of jump in and test it with a bunch of boxes everywhere and go, oh, okay, you're going to be able to see this. Right?
Yeah. So we're not arting up an area without testing it. John, I know you just finished up like grey boxing, white boxing. The industry has lots of terms for it. Let's go with grey.
We're allowed to say what that area is?
No, let's hold off saying what that area is. But you've just finished white boxing that up with our designer Lawrence to make sure the level design there. And that's something we've talked about in the most recent devlog is we don't want to just have random stuff placed. In some areas we will, and we want that emergent gameplay, but for our more featured locations, like in the GDC demo we had what we're calling the nature reserve. For those more featured locations, we want to have actual level design in there. We want to have it feel like a Call of Duty Battlefield map. Obviously it won't be as refined as those are because they are known quantities. This is a box, you play in the box. With us, you're just like, here's your box. Oh, well, there's a hole in the box here, there's a hole in the box here, there's a hole. Like, now everything flows into it.
Trying to combine that
sandboxing
gameplay with the core.
A more authored experience. And from what we've seen so far, it seems like it's a good idea and it's working relatively well. But we want to grey box up these features. So there's a process to it.
Okay. I'm actually going to skip forward a question and skip back. So, because this one kind of ties in with that really neatly. So, how often in the map do you place points of interest, e.g., small towns, villages, contestable areas, like bridges or tunnels, that kind of stuff? How often do you kind of?
I mean, there's no real answer for that. It's more just
how long's a piece of string?
Yeah, like jumping in and testing it and see what it's like, and it depends what's around there as well. So it's something that there is no real answer to. It's just what feels good, what plays well when we test it, really.
And the thing is, like, what we're looking at is, so these feature areas are coming in different scales.
Yeah.
And they will be fairly self-contained things, and they will be able to be placed in different points around the map. So if we go, right, we've got this train, we'll put this here, and maybe we won't art it up completely, but we'll see how does this play. This plays pretty well. Now I move across here, and then we can shift these around. Hopefully, that's the dream. Whether or not we can pull it off, but that's what we've had conversations.
I was gonna say it's been working so far as well. Lawrence, it's quite cool when Lawrence can go away, just getting a sort of design bubble and sort of play test things and try things on his own, and he comes back to me and it's like, "Hey John, I've got this little, 200 meter by 200 meter box with these cool design features in. Where could this fit in the environment?" And then we have this conversation of how can these things work together? So,
I think it's important to note that in between these things isn't necessarily just going to be empty space.
No. It's not just going to be like fields and fields and fields.
Which ties me neatly into the question that would have preceded this, that is now not preceding this, which is there going to be a large variety of different biomes to play in? From what I've seen so far, it's mainly been tight forests. So biomes, for anyone watching, is kind of just a fancy word for
thematic sort
the thematic
I mean,
different environment types.
Different environment types.
I'm going to say yes, absolutely. They are correct. We've shown a lot of the foresty, nature reserve style gameplay. But yeah, there's more. There's a lot more.
Some beaches.
Yeah, coastal areas and
some coastal stuff.
You know, we're in Scotland, so I imagine there'll be some highland areas. I don't know how much I can say about all these different things.
we're like just there
neat
are
rocks.
Neat rocks.
Neat looking rocks.
The rocks they're a bone of contention. Let's not go into rocks.
There's a dank leak. There will be rocks.
But no, so you know, if you look at the Scottish environment, you know, there is a lot of forest there, but there's also highlands, which are rocky and lots of scree and lots of just, you know, cool mountainous terrain.
There's some like
and then you got lowlands,
which
is more scrubby and
farmland as well.
Farmlands. So there's going to be a lot more.
And they're all hopefully going to have, or the way I see it is they're all going to have their own distinct sort of gameplay style. You know, if you're in a forest and everything's closer and there's more cover,
you might want to break out that shotgun when you're in the forest.
Whereas if you're in a big open field, or if you're in you know, the Highlands where there's maybe not much trees, but there's a lot of shrubbery, you might have to think about how you're going to play.
Yeah. And that's just the biological, the side of things. There's also going to be the man-made stuff.
Yeah, there's going to be the built
villages,
stuff as well, right?
towns.
And at that point, we can really do whatever we want design-wise. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, we showed some pictures already, so it's not really a leak or anything. But we showed some art for industrial-looking stuff and the towers and so on that Connor was working on, and then the wall. The Great Wall of Ireland, which someone else is going to pay for. So there's going to be some of that stuff as well, right? So it's going to be a combination of all that stuff. It's going to be your biome selection, I think. So,
speaking of walls, I did have someone ask me in the office the other day. It might have been John actually, who built Hadrian's Wall. And for those people who don't know what Hadrian's Wall is, it's an old Roman wall that goes between
Scotland and England.
Scotland and England.
So when they gave up on fighting the Scottish,
it's like just don't cross this,
a wall, and let's pretend they're not there.
That's a simplification. There was a lot of trade, but we'll not get into a history lesson about that just now. But yeah, so you know, it's good that I'm here to keep Scottish history correct.
I've had no haggis.
Oh, that's all you need to know.
Was it who did build it? Who did build it?
The Romans.
The Romans.
Yeah.
Romans. Yeah, I think you're going to tell me like a specific.
Anyway?
I don't know. Roads.
Yeah.
Wait. Oh yeah. Right. So, when we place points of interest, are we considering the travel time between them, and kind of how much that translates to in game time? I think we answered that a little bit earlier when we were talking to that.
We're
guy.
Definitely going to consider that and. We'll get the main points in, and like we say, it's not just all going to be scrub land and stuff around it. It's not going to be I go from blank area to point of interest, from point of interest to blank area. Yeah. There'll be bits and pieces in there, there'll be smaller featured points of interest in there. So yeah, we'll as soon as we've got the key stuff in, then we'll start looking at the through lines through that, where we maybe need to put other stuff because that runs too big. I just play around with that. It's all a balancing act, and I don't think those and I might be wrong, some of the other Battle Royale guys might know the key formula to doing that. I don't know it. I don't think there's a magic formula. I think it takes a lot of playing and just messing around with it and seeing what feels right.
And then there's
giving
the
it to
gaps we
players.
can bridge with vehicles and stuff as well, right?
We'll have vehicles, so we can fill that stuff out.
Yeah, it might be a bit of a trade-off sometimes, maybe the route through the forest takes longer on foot because you're going to have to walk, but then maybe that's safer than just driving down the road. But hey, maybe you've left it too long and you really need to get back in the zone, so maybe you hop in a car or take a motorbike or something.
And maybe you're crazy and you try and drive through a forest.
Mad Max it, just drive through everything.
We're not going to, no.
Okay, so on a funnier note, I guess, or potentially, how far are we going to go with interactable objects? Will there be flavor objects that players can interact with, or will it be focused on objects which shape gameplay? So, the examples this person gave was stuff like flushable toilets.
Interesting.
And faucets. So, maybe they
really
sell
no
bathrooms,
gameplay
I don't
related
know.
stuff.
Yeah, just or like a little bell if there was like a hotel.
Did this.
Yeah.
I don't know, a flushable toilet might have gameplay. You flush that toilet, someone's going to hear it.
Just put some items in first, right?
Can you flood the toilet and then raise the water level?
To the river.
To be honest, we haven't really given a huge amount of thought to this. We want to get the functional and stuff in first, and then that'll be more of a stretch goal because we're all up for doing silly little things
There might be one or two little things that end up.
Definitely, you know.
It'd be a nice throwback to CryEngine's or Crytek's kind of heritage. I know one of the weird things with the Crytek 1, this is my fun fact for the day, was how many things you could interact with was actually kind of unparalleled at the time. Like anything that you could see in the environment, like boats and stuff, you could pretty much just go in your little power suit mode and start punching them around, which, you know, is something that's obviously made games like Far Cry really memorable now, but you couldn't really do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of like dynamic objects, or we call them dynamic objects, things that will react to the player, that we're having that.
Right.
Yeah, we've already got elements.
A toilet that
of
will flush, or you know, an oven you can turn on. You know, that's stretch goals and.
Oh, just turn the. Oh, you could literally leave the oven on when you go somewhere.
That would be so cool.
Oh, that'd be great. Just the gas,
Can I just put my head in the oven? Yeah, I give up and I'm doing really badly.
Just you imagine you leave the gas on, you know, you bait someone and leave a door open, that kind of thing, from the bottom of the house. You know, not too many doors, just to fill up the place. And as soon as you see someone walk in, just get the flare in there.
We have had those conversations. They're definitely cool things we want to look at. Yeah. But like I said, get the base interactions in, and then the rest goes from there.
Yeah. So for now, you won't need to worry about leaving the oven on at home.
Yeah, but, or like not flushing the toilet.
In the near future. Yeah, that one gets us all of us, I'm sure, right? Throughout the development, have you guys had goals in which to make immersion? Which make immersion systems integrated, or perhaps was it done as you went along? I think it's fair to say we kind of had a lot of stuff that was really core early on, like before we started making anything, pretty much, right?
The fundamental thing for this game is that we want to make a game that is a lot more. You know, it isn't just another battle royale game. It's something that has loads of extra stuff on top. And so we've had that from the start, and it's something we build on and look at what we're doing.
Yeah, those were some of the first conversations we had when we were, you know, first concepting the game, when it was like, you know, in its very early stages. Like, okay, we have this. So how do we do that? And one of the first things that came up was this whole world simulation, emergent behavior. You know, how does a player leave an impact on the world? And yeah, that's been there since the get-go. So that's all being integrated into the game. It's not just been layered on top.
I think you covered that really well in the, or you covered some of that really well in the appropriate Making Mavericks that goes with this video, actually, where you talked about how some of the kind of rules that you'll learn to understand and how to kind of bend those to your favor, really. So it's pretty neat. So this question is almost worth skipping. If it wasn't for that last little bit of the answer, was if on the latter, which wasn't, if the latter, throughout the coming years of evolution of this world, including like machine learning and player actions, all that kind of fun stuff that we've already mentioned before. Can we add new stuff like this, basically, is what they're asking,
we'll have our
right?
core set, but there's nothing to say we can't add more things in there. There's, you know, once you have a core of a game, and like I say, I come across as an asshole when I say, like, you know, adding content. Adding content isn't easy, but it's, when you have a base to build on, you know, it does become easier. And I definitely can see things we could add as we go forward. Just like amping up our level of destruction. You know, we're already going to go into this with a great level of destruction, but maybe there's more we can do. We talked about, you know, blowing up dams. Maybe there's bridges. Maybe there's larger things. Maybe there's smaller things. Maybe I can clog a toilet. I don't know. You know, I think there's a lot we can do, but let's get the base in, see how people react to it, and, you know, we're smart guys here, I like to think. But the hive mind of a player base, they will see things, and even from this, they'll see things that you don't necessarily see. And we want to give ourselves room to maneuver and go, that's awesome, we didn't expect that to happen, how do we build on that? You don't want to go in with like these massive grand plans of what you're going to do for the next X years. You want to have a good idea of where you're headed, but you want to be able to pivot when you see really cool stuff coming up. And that's my approach to it.
No, that's cool. Are we also going to include terrain destructibility? And if so, will players be able to make sizable craters with stuff like explosives, e.g. to use like foxholes in a field?
Interesting.
So, I was going to leave John to answer this one, so I'll probably pass it across him. I think CryEngine can handle that.
Well, I've never tried it in CryEngine before. Fundamentally, in the engine, there are tools to sculpt the landscape, so you can push the landscape in and out, fundamentally in the engine. Whether we can translate that into the game, we have a smart tech team, I'm sure they could figure out a way. So it's a very interesting concept. I haven't heard much about it now, but again, that falls into that same as the last question. You know, we're flexible with this sort of stuff, so moving down the line, if this is something that the players want maybe, and something that we think is really going to enrich gameplay, then.
But that's a good point. When you talk about enriching gameplay, we got to make sure it's actually something that does
has a function.
Does have a function and does feel good. And on the surface, it sounds like that could be really interesting, but until we do a deeper dive into what that could be used for and how it could all work, it could just turn out that people just end up in holes in the entire game, and that's
that could
not
just replace you hiding in a bush.
Yeah, you just dig a hole, and that might dig a hole, get someone to park a car over the top of it. Job done.
Yeah, and it could break the environment.
Yeah, and it could have a lot of knock-on effects. One from a technical standpoint, but other from a gameplay standpoint.
For example,
so I don't know. Like, it's something that we can look at, but we want to make sure that we're coming at this from the correct route. We've got to look at everything, each individual, and see where that adds stuff to it. And that's one of these weird ones where, on the surface, it sounds good, but my gut tells me that could cause more problems and not be as fun as you think. Yeah. But I don't know right now.
I actually have a question I'm going to add to this, I think, which will go really neatly with this follow-up question, so I'll do it all together. So how does destructibility in the environment work? They asked, is it like Rainbow Six Siege, where you put bullet holes in walls, and it'll make the holes exactly where the bullets hit, and then whatever? Or is it like Fortnite, where it's like a more static destruction animation? Because Fortnite does like, if you hit something, it kind of just falls apart, right? So one thing I'd like to add to that is, how is that destruction going to affect other parts of the terrain, not just holes in the floor, but like trees and all that kind of fun stuff, right? So
So to answer the first part of that question, how does destruction work? It really depends on what aspect you're looking at. Right. So there are multiple destruction systems that we've got. For example, glass windows. You can shoot the window, and it's called a boolean. It cuts a hole out of the glass, like a bullet hole. And then if you shoot like 4 or 5, that middle chunk will actually fall out dynamically. Right. So we have that really high fidelity destruction, all the way up to things like, if you blow, if you or throw a grenade at a wall, and that wall's flexible enough or is weak enough, we'll actually blow out. But that's a different system. That's not that whole dynamic system. So we have a whole spectrum of things which should give us the fidelity, that Rainbow Six has, and that's what we're going for. In terms of the second question of terrain, so things like trees, bushes and stuff like that, the idea is that some trees, depending on how big they are, if you drive a car into a massive oak tree that's been there for 200 years, the tree's
probably not going to care very much.
The tree's going to win that one.
But if there's like thin little spindly saplings, there's no reason why if you shoot them they can't snap and break off. It's something that actually Crysis did, like you were saying before. You could do that in Crysis. In the first Crysis, you can mow down some trees. So there's just.
But then there's other destruction systems. That's the the more man-made destruction, and we touched on the trees and stuff. But then there's also things like our fire propagation system. We want to have roaring fires in the game. We want these large patches of grass that people might be potentially hiding in, or bushes people are hiding in. As well, throw a Molotov cocktail, sit here with a gun, see if someone pops out. That might, the wind might change direction and it might, mess you up instead. But those are kind of fun dynamic systems. That's another element of destruction we want to look at too. Not just can I blow stuff up, can I knock stuff down, can I, take out this foliage, can I do other things like that? So that's the kind of thing we're talking about too.
Okay. One other thing I'd like to kind of hit on there is, will we have stuff like secondary destruction? Like if you burn something, can you then blow it up? Or can you break it once it's burned? Is that something we're going to have?
I don't see why not. Like, is there an example you can think of? Like a wooden crate, for example?
If I burn a tree, do I blow it up and turns to ashes? Maybe?
Well, probably not just like into a puff of ash, because a tree wouldn't really.
Yeah, it wouldn't burn at the core. So
But there's no reason why if it's a burned tree you can't shoot it down how you could the healthy version of that tree. Or if there was some sort of wooden crate that was charred and broken, you can still break that. Like we want this world to feel and react how you would expect it to as a player. So if I shot a wooden crate, whether it was burnt or not, I would expect it to break apart. And die.
Okay. Cool. So final question. And I already kind of know the answer to this anyway. But will players be able to experience the alpha version of Mavericks?
No.
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 No. I don't think there's a point in that, really, because, like, as we said before, unlike a lot of studios, I think we're doing a very realistic beta where it's not a finished game. You know, like, people have sort of become semi-accustomed to these betas where, you know, it's basically a done game. The game comes out a week later and they don't change it.
It's a big marketing push, right?
This is our closed beta is a closed beta. You know, it's not going to be a finished game. It's going to be something where we are expecting a lot of testing feedback. I believe that's going to be fun to collate all that stuff. Yeah, and we are going to iterate on that towards the release and kind of like learn what's working and what's maybe not working as well as we thought. So no, you won't be able to experience the alpha, but yeah, the beta is going to be, I guess, what a lot of people might call an alpha in some sense, because the alpha for us is like technical stuff. Really.
It's all like, you know, these names are fluid.
The testing
especially
word
nowadays.
will be
you know, I'm from an old school MMO background where a beta was a beta where we're actually trying to get feedback on the game and make changes based on it instead of going
for a demo.
Exactly.
You just do it live and balance everything post-launch. That's how you do it these days.
Well, I guess nowadays, actually, not to be so harsh, like betas, I guess, are normally used as like stress test servers, so they'll just release it to everyone to see how many people.
Oh yeah, there's definitely elements of that. But but the thing is, as I said before, we want to look at how people are playing the game and be able to react to that, because much as, you know, we are really trying to cover all our bases, make sure everything's as good as well, there's always really things that we don't see, and some of those will be great and unexpected. Emergent behavior, like, that's brilliant. Like, let's leave that in. I've seen that in other games I've worked on, where it's just a thing happens. You're like, I did not see that coming, and it just enriches the game. Other times you go, ooh, that doesn't work. We need to change that. So we want that, so the game goes out in its best possible format when it does launch.
I get the question though, because we're all gamers too. And then when we see a
everyone
game we
wants
want to play,
it
it's
as
like,
soon as
can I play it?
possible, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, we see shiny things, we want shiny things, but I don't think you'd like.
No, I
the
think
alpha.
I'll ruin it for you. Yeah.
You're better having a look at it when it's in a better format.
Okay, well, that's basically everything. That is actually everything, should I say. So that was cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining me on that one. Thank you for answering all those community questions. So yeah, tune in for next week for another Making Mavericks where we're talking about characters. You'll get to meet a character artist team. How many times can I say character in this sentence? And that's going to be really cool. And you'll probably meet Connor again, maybe.
Connor gets everywhere. He's
Connor gets
lovable.
everywhere. Yeah, so... Yeah.